Just before the halftime interval, and the second half is going to be shorter than the first, I'm just going to tell you my story. So for those of you who don't normally come, what happens in Soul Point as well is, and this is what we consider to be the most important part, is we tell you a little bit about Christianity that we hope will just make an impact on you as it's impacted our lives. And so I'm going to give you my testimony, which is kind of my story about how I became a Christian. So, brought up in a Christian family, going to church, believing in God for as long as I can imagine. But none of those made me a Christian. I thought they did, but I discovered later on they didn't. So I would play rugby in the morning. I would play for Baglan. Anybody play for Baglan here? Rugby? No, I played for Baglan on Sunday morning. In the afternoon, I would go to Sunday school. And then when I was a bit older, I stopped playing rugby. I was in my teenage years, and I would go to church in the night. And I went to church because my dad said to me, he said, Neil, I'll only ever ask you to do one thing for me. This is the one thing I want you to do. I just want you to come to church. That's all he said. And because I had so much respect for my parents, I still do, I thought, okay, that's fair enough. I'll come to church. But I found it boring, if truth be known. And I thought the Christians were a little bit weird. And so in my head, I had a plan that when I went to university, I'd be able to kind of leave home and I'd kind of get my sort of get out of church free card because I wouldn't be offending mum and dad then by not going to church. So that was my plan until I was sat in church on one Sunday and then another Sunday, and the preacher who had preached so many times before, and I thought it was boring, and I didn't take any of it in, I didn't understand any of it whatsoever, it started to hit me really hard. And I started finding myself like crying in the services. So I'd be there kind of like rubbing my eyes and people be saying to me like, nearly okay? And I'd be just, oh, yeah, something in my eye, yeah. You know, the way you try and cover it up. I'm like a 17-year-old boy, and I'm crying in church. And I was seeing what I never saw before. So I always had this idea that God was kind of somewhere up in the sky, a long way up, and maybe at the end, because I believed in him, when I die, I'd get to see him, and he would look at me and think, Neil, decent guy, yeah, you're probably good enough for heaven. That's what I thought was my concept of God. But suddenly I'm seeing two things. The first thing I'm seeing is that the stuff that I was doing, which I thought was okay, I was suddenly thinking, actually, it's not okay. And I was starting to see that even my pride was ugly, and I'd never seen that before. And so the first thing I realized is like, oh man, I'm a sinner. I saw it. And I didn't think I was good enough for heaven anymore. And there was a second thing that I saw as well, because people were saying to me, like, Neil, have you been born again? I was like, what on earth is that, being born again? And they were saying, actually, you can get to know God personally, and you can have new life inside. And that intrigued me. So I went on a crusade for truth. Now, if you know me, you'll know that I am one of the biggest skeptics and cynics in the world. So if anybody ever says anything to me, I'm dubious. I need to know, okay, is that true? Did it really happen? Was it psychological? I need to know all that stuff. So I had loads of questions that I wanted to get sorted out. And there was one day, there was a knock on the door. No, it's probably the doorbell went. I'm not going to do a doorbell noise. And I opened the door, and there were two young men in suits. And then when they spoke, they had American accents. And they said, hi, we're from the Church of the Latter-day Saints. I said, come in. I thought, church, I want to discover whether God is real. I want to know whether Jesus is the way. I just want to know truth. And they came in, and I then discovered that they were Mormons. I don't know if you've ever heard of Mormons before. But I thought, oh, hey, if the Mormons are right, I don't care. I just want to find out the truth. And so they spoke to me. They gave me a Mormon Bible. I said I'd read bits of it. And then they sent two other Mormons. And then they sent two more, and then they sent two more. I spoke to 8 Mormons altogether, trying to convert me. But do you know, at that time, I thought, it just has a ring of something that feels made up. That's what I thought about Mormonism. And so I'm on my crusade for truth. The next thing that happens, I'm on a holiday now, but all this time, it just feels that God is working in my life. I'm feeling my sin. I'm seeing it all the time. I'm in a car at one particular occasion, okay? So I'm with a friend who's a bit crazy in this car. He had an old Golf GTI, and we enjoyed going in his car because he would just overtake everything. But I was in his car on one occasion, sitting in the back, and he overtook a car going up a hill around a bend. And I just thought, if a car comes down the other way and we can't see it, it's going to be a head-on, and I am dead. And I think at this moment in time, I'm heading to hell. So that really scared me. Okay, week before I became a Christian, I'm on a boating holiday. So I'm 17, I'm on a boating holiday with 11 other friends. So we're in a barge going down the Thames, and every night we stop off at a different pub and we get hammered. That's just essentially what we did for the week. But there was one pub that I was in, and I was hammered. And I didn't think about what I was doing, but I found myself on top of a table shouting at everyone in the pub. And I was shouting at everybody saying, you all need to be saved. You all need Jesus. Why can't you be saved? And I'm completely off my head, obviously. I don't know what I'm doing to some extent. So my friends drag me off the table. We get thrown out to the pub. One of my friends now is walking along the bank of the river, and he's wagging his finger at me, telling me, you and your stupid God have got us thrown out to this pub. And then he fell into the Thames. So all my mates were like, God's pushed him into the Thames. God had got him. But so I guess this is the point I'm making. So at this point, I'm believing in God. I'm feeling my sin. I'm being drawn to Jesus as the only one who can forgive me for my sin. I'm even on a table in a pub preaching the gospel, and I wasn't yet a Christian. 4 days later, I think it was, I go to see my church minister. I ask loads of questions. So he answers some of them. And some he says, listen, they'll get sorted out. When you become a Christian, you'll understand more. Some, Neil, you just never get your head around because they're just such difficult things. But there's one thing you know you need to do. And I knew what I needed to do. So I went home, and do you know the thing that was stopping me becoming a Christian for all this time was about 6 months on my crusade for truth. I thought that Christians believed everything by faith, and that meant they stopped thinking. So I thought that Christians never thought about it. I thought faith was not using your intelligence anymore. And I thought, I can't become a Christian until I've worked out every single answer, and then I can switch off my brain and just believe everything by faith. That's what I thought it was. It isn't at all. I can assure you that. It's reasonable. It's based on evidence. You don't switch your brain off. So here I am now, okay? So this is a long time ago, July the 21st, 1988, 4 o'clock, and I'm in my bedroom, and I'm reading this little book, which just helps you to become a Christian. And I get to the point where I just think, I'm going to pray now. And so I prayed, and I said, God, will you save me? And Jesus, I want you to come into my life. I want to live for you. And you know, as I was praying that, I knew at the time I was believing. I just knew that I was going to get saved. And so I opened my eyes, and I didn't know what I was going to expect. I was expecting something to happen. Now, when people become Christians, sometimes it feels like it's a gradual thing. And for other times, for people, it feels like a big bang, a big explosive event. For me, it felt explosive because I'm sitting there and all of a sudden, I just feel that something inside is filling me right up. Kind of, I don't know if any of you have ever had an adrenaline injection and you get an adrenaline rush. It felt like an adrenaline rush. And suddenly it felt like the room I was in, my bedroom, was just filled with this presence, which I know now is the presence of God. And I found myself talking to God like he's in the room. So before my idea was like, God's up there somewhere, a million miles away, maybe I'll meet him at the end. Now I find myself just talking like he's in the room, and I start crying my eyes out. And I start singing, and I start thanking God. And for hours, the whole evening, I'm just talking to God and talking to God. And I'm just amazed at what's happened to me. I go to sleep, wake up the next day, and I just know I'm different. I just know that something inside me had changed. forever. I knew that I had the meaning of life. It was like, when people ask, what's the meaning of life? I just knew that that moment, I've got it now. I've got it because God's in my life. I'm living for him. He's my maker. I'm living for him. And nothing can destroy that purpose. Every other purpose that you and I might have in life will be destroyed by death. But when you live for God, not even death destroys that purpose. It goes on for all eternity. And here I am, guys, over 30 years on now, and still to this day, using my brain, using my intelligence, loving science, reading history, loving archaeology, and I'm still convinced that Jesus is the Son of God, the Savior of the world. Still convinced that God is, and God has been faithful to me every single day since. Some of you may believe in God. Yeah, some of you may even believe in Jesus. But it is vitally important for you to know that you need to get to the point where you ask him personally to save you. And where you say in your heart to Jesus, Jesus, I want to live for you for the rest of my life. And when you do that, God goes from being up there to being in here. And it is incredible. It would be the greatest thing that you could ever do in your life. Let me just say a quick prayer, and then we're going to have a 10-minute break. Let me just pray. Father, thank you so much that you saved me. I just would love it, God, if you've spoken to some people here, if you will help them, if not now, but when they go home, maybe tonight, to turn to you and to be able to believe and to ask you into their lives. Thank you so much, God. Amen.